Good Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tushar. I'm the lead auditor here at Sustainable Certification, and we want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today you'll be hearing from Paul Dos Santos, who is extremely experienced, has got many years of experience in cybersecurity and IT area, and also has a lot of extensive experience in the 27001 standard. Today, the objective is to really outline some of the key and critical changes that one could expect with the upcoming release of the new 27001 version of the standard, as we know. Currently known as 2013, but expected to be later released in its new format. Just to go through a bit of housekeeping, in the spirit of reconciliation, Sustainable Certification acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. Just before we get started, our speaker slides and other resources we mentioned will be shared with you after the event, so please don't stress about that. If you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them in the chat and we'll try and get an answer for you. And for you to have the best experience, please make sure you are muted unless when you are asked to unmute for any questions. And now I just give you a bit of background about Paul. He has had over 15 years in IT security and also managed services. He has had a lot of extensive experience in the cybersecurity space, especially in risk and gap assessments, as well as security architecture, operations, and cybersecurity strategy initiatives. Over his experience, Paul's experience has given him an in-depth knowledge of IT architecture, blended with security incident response and cybersecurity assessment experience, enabling him to have a really good understanding of the customer environment. He also brings considerable experience in ISO 27001, NIST, as well as the COBIT frameworks to the Stickman cyber team. Paul is meticulous in his approach, driven by customer service, and is an empowering mentor to all around him. I'll now hand it over to Paul.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I just want to get to show you see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Just wanna, it's the presentation screen, right? Right, so thank you for that. I will try not to make this a death by PowerPoint presentation as much as I can. There's a fair amount of content to speak about specifically around the changes and what's it mean for you as an ISO, either ISO certifying to ISO or already certified to ISO, but looking to the next phase of our dear standard. So just a little bit about me. Yep, as you can tell by the accent, South African accent, been in IT in general for over 25 years. 15 years ago, decided to make a bit of a change and specialize in security. Started out as security architecture and solutioning, firewalls and ISPs and stuff of that nature. And then I moved into security operation centers as they started coming up, and managed a couple of security operation centers in Australia. Also, part of the experience, the joy and the experience has been the senior GRC consultant, incident response manager, and I'm currently acting as a virtual CISO for a couple of ASX listed businesses. So, and all those businesses are currently ISO certified. So it is a great time to talk about this topic. The agenda really is just like, what is the changes, the transition period, how are they going to, how's this 27002 affecting our organizations? Also regards the when is, because there's been two changes. So ISO 27002 has been released, was released February this year, which is the control set. And ISO 27001 2022 is coming October. So we'll talk about that, some tips and strategies, probably some of them that are pretty obvious. Others would be hopefully would be good for yourselves, and then any questions and answers from yourselves. So proposed date of release. So February 2022, ISO 27002, the controls, what we all know as Annex A controls, came out. They were a bit outdated. Let's not kid around. 2013, it was pretty evident that the business was no longer being done the way we do business anymore. 2013 was all about our own data centers, our in-house servers, and things have changed. So the council did decide to make some tweaks regarding the ISO 27002 controls. So that's that. The ISO 27001 will be published. I have under good authority. It will be published in October 2022. The reason that they did controls first is to get everyone customized to what the controls look like now. Whereas the ISO 27001 2022 in October literally has a couple of word changes, but the essence and the core of ISO 27001 clauses, mandatory clauses, are pretty much the same. So for those that are new to ISO 27001, you have essentially, they form part of each other. ISO 27001 is the standards mandatory clauses. So basically that's how the business maintains their ISMS. That's like the rules, the function around the how the ISMS is maintained and the actions and principles governing that ISMS. The controls are those controls, technology controls, people controls, organizational controls that actually work hand in hand with the ISO 27001. So talking to the transition period. So the transition period in their brilliance, they decided, the IOS decided, IOS is International Organization of Standardization, who developed 27001 and 9001 and 3000 and all of the other standards. They basically have transitioned in a certification cycle. So you have your certification cycle and then your two surveillance cycles. So the one certification cycle and allows you to the one full certification cycle allows you to basically make these changes. So when ISO 27000 is published, some of the changes, the wording changes will be around the updating of the statement of applicability. It will no longer mention obviously 2013, but rather 2022. It'll talk about new infosec risk processes and in line with the new controls, and what's going to happen. It's not there, but what will happen is there'll be amendments to certain sections of your existing policies, obviously, because now you will no longer be talking about certain controls, but looking specifically at other controls. So the primary changes, I'll spend a bit of time on this slide. So what might look like a fantastic idea, 114 controls now moving down to 93 controls, it actually it's not quite that, right? So some controls are actually, even though there are new controls, some of the controls are actually merged together. So as an example, what was ISO, sorry, I just want to check what slide I'm on. What was ISO control Annex A control 17, which 17 was also was like so drawn out. 17 was information security aspects of business continuity. Then you had 17.1, which was information security continuity. Then you had 17.1.1, which was finally the control that you were looking for, which was planning information security and continuity. Then you had 17.1.2, which was implementing information security continuity. And it was quite convoluted. Now what they've done is they've merged it all into 5.29, and it's information security during disruption. And basically, it combines all of those controls into one easier to identify control. Also, things that they've taken away, thankfully, something like teleworking, because I don't know who teleworks anymore. I actually can't even think in 2010 who teleworked, but there you go. There was the teleworking has disappeared, and they're now more focused on VPNs, because that was inferred, right? Teleworking, we all, as auditors and assessors, we inferred that they were talking about remote working and kind of adjusted it so that we were talking about remote working and VPN control in that remote working, etc. Another great thing that they've done is they've actually now grouped it. So instead of having the clauses in 17, 18 different clauses where you had to run around and work through every single clause, now they've kind of grouped it into 4 main areas. As you can see on the screen: people, physical, organizational, and technological. This, in my view, they've done this for one main reason, is to help assessors and auditors. So in your surveillance audit, if you're doing a surveillance audit, sometimes the auditor will go, oh, I want to look at access control, all these things. And now they can just say, right, I'm just going to focus on this surveillance audit, I'm just focusing on your organizational controls, or I'm focusing on your technological controls and your people controls. And they don't have to focus on go up and down between controls to figure out what they're doing. Another point I want to make, and it's quite an important point, we always hear about IT security or infosec security is not an IT problem, but it's a business problem. Well, in these clauses and the way that they've grouped it, you can actually see that IT is actually 34 controls only. The rest is organizational, people, and physical controls. So it's actually showing that, and the way that the standard is also thinking is that this is over, where we all consider, leave security to the IT folk. It's now a true business. It's now a true business issue. You want to put it that way. Is there anything else I wanted to say about this? So controls are updated, new controls, and there's 24. So the 24 merged controls are what you'll see. There's 17.1, there's 5.1, there's a couple of them. So in fact, we have not reduced the controls, we've just made them a lot easier to audit and to assess internally. So slide 7 is around the main change, some of the controls that have changed, right? So I'm going to basically pick 2 in this list. So the one being threat intelligence. So threat intelligence is pretty clear. It's a new control. We never spoke about threat intelligence in any of the previous. Well, it wasn't explicit in any of the 27,002 2013. And now they've made it explicit. So I, as an auditor, used to use 8.6.14 to talk about threat intelligence and other contact with special interest groups, whether it was external facing groups like ISA or like the ACSC, and also has their own threat intelligence, and also companies like Stickman, who obviously through a SOC have our other threat intelligence. So I as an auditor or an assessor, would use that control to kind of talk about threat intelligence, but it wasn't, as I said, wasn't explicit. Now it's called out there, 5.7. It's explicit. It wants you to go out and, as a business, and build your own intelligence, either internally, or you go out and you get a provider in your industry that will actually run the threat intelligence for you. In some cases, it's around the context of your function or your area. Other times it's actually full technical, push it into your SOC teams or into your SIEM platform for them to review technological intelligence. Then another one I wanted to point out is physical security monitoring. So you might say, wait, I've been talking about physical security for forever. We've always talked about it. Every audit that we've done there is a physical security monitoring passage, or there's a security monitoring control. But actually, I think it was A11.1.1 and A11.1.2, which talks about physical security controls and physical security perimeter, don't again specifically talk about monitoring and surveillance. What they've done now is they've tweaked it and said, actually, 7.4 is very clear guidance of what is expected around cameras, alarms, security, etc. Now, I understand, and I know because I've spoken to some smaller businesses, and they've said to me, well, we're not going to put in cameras, or, what the hell, now we've got to spend all this money, or spend some money to get alarms and cameras and things of that nature. But what I remind them is that most of those companies actually have got everything in data centers and or with SaaS providers who are actually living in data centers themselves, and they already have that state-of-the-art security. And I believe that that was the intention to this control, the way they tweaked it to put some focus and some onus onto the data centers that we are actually we're ingesting those services. Just grab some water. Right, slide 8. So I think this is the game changer in the way that they've created this control, these 27,002 2022. So they've basically added attributes or tags, if you want to call them, at in every control, and they've given you well, in this case, 5 ways to slice a control. So if you want to look at it from a information security properties, core CIA properties, you can tag it like that. You can tag it by corrective, preventive, and detective, and you can even tag it to cybersecurity concepts, which are like exactly aligned to NIST concepts. So they've done these things in a way so that you can slice and dice your controls the way you want to view them, the way you want to assess them, the way you want to audit them. And the way, if you want to do a maturity process against a NIST framework, as an example, you can use the cybersecurity concepts, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and you can literally map it across to a NIST. So in your SOA, as you mature your SOA, you can say, well, so this control is applicable to me. Why is it applicable to me, which is part of the current standard SOA? This is the risk that it treats. And then you can go a step further and you say, and I'm mature to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, based on the NIST framework. I'm very mature, I'm developing, and so it will add more context in the SOA, which I think is fantastic. So this is an example straight out of the standard. So this is control 5. And as you can see, policies for information security, we're talking about what control type it is. It's a preventative control type. It will talk because it's policies. It will talk about confidential integrity availability, obviously. The concept is identify, which fits directly into IDAM 5, I think, of NIST. Operational capabilities obviously is it's a governance piece, and what security domain is it? So, which I think is going to be, if you can structure your SOA in such a way that you can slice and dice, I think this is going to make life a lot more interesting when assessing your SOA and assessing controls. Oops. Now this is, how does this affect you, right? So how does this affect a business or organization going into or about to certify or certifying? So we've currently pushed them into 2 different buckets, really, because there might be slight inferences and slight changes, but it's essentially you're currently implementing and you're planning to certify, and it's just around the corner, or you're already certified and now you've got to make the changes to 2022. So since coming in October, you have to if you're about to implement and you're about to certify, you're planning to certify, you're on that journey. And a lot of people are asking, like, so do I wait for October 2022 or what happens? It's really around the impact of that it's going to affect your business. So as an example, if there's a customer that's looking to have you certified pre-October, and there's this amount of pressure being added by that customer for you to do it in order to get the next contract or whatever it is, the next SOW signed, then carry on with your assessments and whatever you're doing, your internal audits as you're going, and don't wait because of October 2022. Because as I said before, the changes are so slight that you can actually just keep going. number one. Number two, they're giving us a 3-year or certification term, a certification cycle to get up to date to 2022. So my view is that generally we should just proceed with an implementation of ISO 27013 using existing Annex A controls, because ISO 27001 2013 only refers to ISO 27002 2013 Annex A controls. So if you wanted to certify using the 2022 controls, you'd have to kind of map them back, and it's a bit messy at the minute. So rather just keep on going with your 2013. October 2022, as it says, the standard will be updated, and then you can work on, once you're certified, you can now work on moving into the 2022 structure. For an organization that's already certified, so the iOS has provided if you buy the 27002 2022 standard, there already is a mapping, right, which is okay. So what it's doing is it's mapping its table B1 and B2. Basically, what it's doing is it's mapping all the old controls to the new controls, and then B2 is the other way around. So it's mapping all the new controls to the old controls to help you assist when building your SOA. Now that you've got to change the SOA, it helps you to move into that structure, because in your SOA you'll already have a lot of detail. So essentially, as organizations, to me, the best way to start the journey is to actually look at your current SOA and start making changes to that SOA based on ISO 27002 2022, and start that mapping. If you are before October 2023 that you need to recertify, if you don't, then you can build your SOA post 2022, October 2022, in just the new standard, essentially. Sorry, I know there's a lot of 2013, 2022 ISO 27000, but hopefully you're getting the explanation. So some tips. Some of them are pretty straightforward, right? So we have, and if number one generally is, we're obviously going to have to do a new assessment and do an analysis of, based on the current controls versus the new controls as they've stipulated in the standard, are they now applicable? Unless you're not a design house and you've got external and you don't have any development and things like that, generally the applicability will stay the same. I find a lot of businesses have most of those controls applicable to them. But you might find that now there's no cause for applicability. One clause that definitely will not be applicable to is teleworking, right? Because that won't exist anymore. Number two is update your statement of applicability, the actual statement. This will now give you the right framework for 2022 and forward. 2 and 3 are sort of together. There should be 2 and 2A, which is basically the mapping, if you're going to do this pre or October 2022. Then obviously perform a gap assessment post October 2022, perform a gap assessment in line with the 27002 2022 controls, and then you start the rigorous and fun journey of updating your ISMS documentations and all those operations accordingly. So those are like the core pieces that we have to and start going through. Then what we've done is so 6, 7, 8, and 9 are not necessarily in line. 7, it's just different. You can move them around, because as I was developing this, I would actually 7 is 6, and then no, actually, if I think about it, 7 is, and then I'd move the cut. So finally, I realized that you can actually take any of these steps, and you can. They just helps you get ahead of the curve as it is. So essentially, we need to make sure that our risk assessments and controls are now meet the ISO 27002 2022. Obviously, the updates, review of all the standards, the procedures, and the policies as per the wording of the standard. Then review the internal audit program, because now the internal audit program will again be talking about different focus areas, and this is where you can have a look at. So as an example, one of our customers in Stickman, what we're doing is we're actually going to do a quite an extended, with 2022, we're doing an extended audit cycle, internal audit, but we're just going to focus on those 4 key areas over 6 months, so that we don't do because the customer keeps inferring that they don't have time to do the audits, and they don't have time to do workshops and things of that nature. So we're doing very short workshops across the 6 months in those focus areas where we can just go speak directly to those people in that piece of the business, and we don't have to run around and get a collection of 25 people in a room to what are you doing, it's now a lot more. The focus areas can allow us to split a lot better. Number 9 or number 7, however you want to move them around, is obviously update the risk register. So especially if your risk register talks back to your SOA, you'll need to obviously change the risk register controls to the SOA, the new SOA. And then finally, obviously evaluate if you're using things like 6 clicks or any other of those type of solutions. You've got to make sure that they are now also talking the talk and are in a 2022 view. So one of our last slides, questions. So we get a lot of these questions along the way. So I'll read the questions quickly, and then we'll do our answers to these questions. So in the earlier stages of ISO 27000 establishment journey, do they wait for ISO 27001 to be published or to get certified? So as I mentioned earlier, it's based on the requirement. But in my view, October is not too far away. So next couple of months is a good time to be making those changes to the SOA and preparing for the new ISO 27001 2022. Then question 2 is similar, but they haven't started. They want to start the ISO journey. Should they use the new set of the controls or the old ones? So this is a question that there's really no answers. It's according to how quickly they want to start, right? So I always say either. So you have the 2-year window. So if you want to move now with the 2013, that's all good. Start 2013 journey, or if you want to hold on until October and start the 2022 journey, it's exactly the same. You know your business better than anyone, so you know the cadence and how people move in the business. So if you feel that you need to get started now because you're only going to get around to getting certified 2 years from now, then get started now. If your business is quick and agile and you know that it can move pretty quickly, then wait for the new standard. Question 3, how will ISO 27002 2022 and ISO 27001 2022 impact my current certification? It doesn't impact it at all. It's not like when they change over, everyone is no longer certified. You keep your certification for your next certification cycle, and then the auditor the external auditor and the internal auditor should start making sure that you're moving across into the new way of doing things. But yeah, there's no impact really right now. Q4, how much time do I need to align my SMS certification cycle? So go aim for 2 years at most, because that's after 2 years, you're now getting to your final cycle, and it may be getting a little tight to complete everything. And then question 5, will the certifying auditor check the changes of our SMS documentation, which is, they've got a double D there, but change there in a second. So your first 2 audits, as I said earlier, probably not going to be as hardcore to make sure that the 2022 changes are coming through. But that 3rd audit, you will be having to comply to 2022 clauses and controls. So those are the frequently asked questions that Stickman gets. I don't know if probably Sustainable gets very similar questions, Sustainable certifications. Yeah, and that's a wrap. Any addition? So good that we made it quick. Any additional questions or answers, sorry, any additional questions that anyone might be interested in asking? Tusha, you might have to open mics now. Tusha, you there?
Hey, Paul. I've just, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute. And yeah, happy to take questions now for 5-10 minutes. Any questions at all?
Good, that means I explained it perfectly.
Yeah,
Ian.
excellent. Good, thanks.
Brilliant, brilliant. All right, well, thank you so much again, Paul, for all your invaluable expertise in this space, and I think we've all learned something new out of the experience today, and we really appreciate all your time. I'd like to extend a big thank you to. As I mentioned at the start, we'll be sending an email in the coming days with all the resources that we mentioned today. We would love it if you could complete a survey that will be sent to you with the slides and provide us with any feedback you might have. Again, would heavily like to thank Paul for all his generous time today. My name's Tusha. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting our webinar, and all the best until next time. Thank you,
Thanks,
Paul.
Tusha and Paul.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.